Sometimes incredible events happen in the natural world, and we can only watch in amazement. This cat raised and nurtured two little orphan tiger cubs. However, years later, something unthinkable happened. David had always enjoyed traveling alone in the wilderness. This allowed him to take a break from the hard work of the city, as well as gain energy and strength. One time, he decided to go deep into the forest, which had always strongly attracted him. David traveled a long way on foot, and when evening came, he set up a tent and began to enjoy the coolness and silence around him. Suddenly, he heard a strange noise that repeated over and over again. David went toward the source of the sound, and was soon surprised to see two very small, seemingly newborn tiger cubs on the grass. He was astonished. There was no sign of their mother anywhere nearby. David waited for a while, but the striped predator never appeared. Perhaps she had fallen victim to poachers or had been killed by disease. David realized that without his help, the tiny defenseless tiger cubs would surely die. They could hardly stand on their paws and squeaked pitifully from cold and hunger. Gently, he picked up the cubs and brought them home. His family was surprised by the arrival of the two little predators, but David managed to convince them to keep the cubs, at least for a while. Now the good man faced an important question: how to feed two tiger cubs who had only recently been born. The answer came naturally. David had a beautiful and graceful cat, Bonnie, whom the whole family adored. Bonnie had recently given birth to kittens again, and David took the risk of introducing her to the wild tiger cubs. At first, the curious cat sniffed the cubs, which were almost her size. However, Bonnie quickly realized that she was looking at inexperienced, defenseless babies in need of love and care. Her maternal instincts kicked in, and she let the cubs drink warm, nourishing milk from her. In just a few days, thanks to the kind cat's efforts, the tiger cubs grew stronger, put on weight, and looked much healthier. Bonnie cared for them as if they were her own kittens, and they followed her everywhere, recognizing her as their only mother. When the cubs began to fight among themselves, Bonnie always stopped their scuffles, even though she was already smaller than her adoptive children. As the days passed, the cubs grew bigger and began to turn into real wild predators. David soon realized that he could no longer keep them at home. It was becoming increasingly dangerous. The growing predators constantly damaged furniture and belongings with their sharp claws and teeth. Meanwhile, Bonnie was not afraid at all, still seeing them as her beloved babies. After some discussion, the family decided to take the young tigers to the local zoo. On the day of parting, all family members were deeply saddened, especially Bonnie, who looked incredibly sad and depressed. She even refused to eat for some time. David handed both tigers over to the zoo, understanding that releasing them into the wild was not an option. Having grown up in domestic conditions, despite their strength and might, they simply would not survive in the wild. With a heavy heart, David entrusted the tigers to the experienced hands of the zoo staff. After that day, he tried not to visit, as each meeting with the predators caused him pain. Years passed. Bonnie had aged significantly, so David decided to take her to the vet. After examining her, the vet advised euthanasia, as she was suffering from numerous age-related diseases. David replied that he would think about it and rushed home. He had one important thing he wanted to do. He decided to give Bonnie a real farewell gift, a visit to the zoo to see the tigers, who were still her adoptive children. Of course, David wasn't sure if the massive predators would recognize the now-aged cat, but he felt he had to try. Arriving at the zoo, David quickly found the spacious enclosure where the two tigers lived. They were now fully grown, gracefully walking around their territory. He approached the enclosure, but to his disappointment, the predators glanced at him indifferently before turning away. Then David took Bonnie out of his bag and brought her to the glass. The moment the tigers saw the house cat, their eyes lit up. They ran to the glass and stood on their hind legs, as if trying to hug their adopted mother. There was no doubt, both tigers recognized Bonnie, the one who had saved their lives and raised them many years ago. Bonnie also recognized her adopted children, despite the fact that they had grown several times over. She plaintively meowed and rubbed against the glass, ready to give them all her tenderness and care once again. Seeing this, David could not hold back his tears. He never expected that even in the animal world, the love between a mother and her children could be so strong. It did not fade with time, but remained just as powerful, despite the interspecies difference. David stood by the tiger enclosure for a long time, unable to separate Bonnie from her adoptive children. That amazing and touching day remained forever in his memory.